fat, gluttonous, sex-crazed, the king who married 6 wives and chopped off 2 of their heads. The king who in old age was so enormous he had to be winched onto his horse. Yet Henry VIII was also a musician who loved books and art, and a religious prude who hated dirty jokes.
Wine, women and song. But there's another grander story here. It tells of the last of the great English warrior kings who fought for their empire in France. Henry VIII was never meant to be king. Succession was marked first for his older brother, Arthur. So instead, during the 1490s, Henry was being primed by his father, Henry VII, to enter the church. Quite astonishingly, when you come to think of his later reputation, our Henry grew up to be an earnestly religious young man.
His education was overseen by his grandmother, the austere Lady Margaret Beaufort, who was so holy that every day she wore a rough hair shirt to remind her that she must constantly suffer for God. Under her guidance, Henry attended up to 6 masses a day and learned to write religious essays. In one, he upheld the sanctity of marriage, writing that, "Whom God hath joined together, let no man put asunder." While the scholarly Henry prayed and studied, his brother Arthur prepared to be king, marrying the Spanish princess, Catherine of Aragon, in an alliance arranged by their father.
Then in 1502, Henry's life turned around. Arthur died. Aged 11, Henry found himself the Prince of Wales and heir to the throne. And unlike his late brother, he'd had no royal responsibilities, no preparation in the arts and duties of kingship. A life that had been focused upon the Holy Spirit was now abruptly redirected upon the harsh realities of power upon earth.
The young Henry was taken in hand by his father, who decided that he should become engaged to Arthur's young widow, Catherine of Aragon, even though she was 6 years older than him. That alliance with Spain was all important.
On the 21st of April in 1509, King Henry VII died, and the 17-year-old Henry VIII became king. His first act was his marriage to Catherine. But in order to be able to marry the wife of his dead brother, he needed to gain special dispensation from the Pope in Rome.
A passage in Leviticus forbade a man to marry his brother's wife, and it warned that such unions would be cursed with childlessness.
After much pressure from English diplomats, the Pope gave his blessing on the union. All the same, Henry was a man who knew his Bible. Those words from Leviticus would come back to haunt him.
But for now, there was only joy. In June 1509, Henry married Catherine. The next day, they were crowned king and queen in Westminster Abbey. Thomas More, later Henry's Lord Chancellor, who would end up being executed, proclaimed that the day was an end to our slavery, the fount of our liberty, the beginning of joy. Despite their age difference, Henry spoke openly of the joy and felicity that Catherine brought him, while Catherine spoke of the greatest gaiety and contentment that there ever was.
The people of England believed that Henry would usher in a golden world. He was a man of formidable physical beauty, 6'3", lean and muscular. As Thomas More described him, his strength befits his majestic body. There's a fiery power in his eyes, there's beauty in his face, and the colour of twin roses in his cheeks.
Henry VII had made England a stable country, but abroad his reign had been a failure. England had lost all her possessions in Europe except for Calais. The young Henry VIII was determined not just to be England's king, but King of France too. To do that, he'd have to launch an invasion across the Channel.
So Henry set about rebuilding his navy. He commissioned a new set of battleships, lighter, more manoeuvrable than their predecessors, but which could carry heavier guns. This was achieved by inventing a sort of watertight gun port, enabling the ships to carry their cannon lower down in the hull. But beyond the technology, with Henry there was always the showman. No vessel, including his beloved Mary Rose, was complete without a panoply of bunting, flags and swirling banners.
In 1512, with the Mary Rose as his flagship, Henry went for the first time to war with France. The Mary Rose, with its artillery, became the key weapon in the attack. For 4 days, the English fleet fought a huge naval battle off the French port of Brest, their force of 25 ships blazing away at the French. The Mary Rose brought down the main mast of the enemy flagship with a single shot. The French admiral was forced to retire. Round 1 had gone to Henry. The next year, Henry set out from the English base at Calais to conduct his first land campaign against the French. He headed a force of 11,000 men, and it was typical of Henry that the key to his army were his archers, for the king himself was a superb shot, and he even passed a law stating that every Englishman, every Saturday afternoon, should spend an hour practicing his archery. But despite his enthusiasm for war, in the summer of 1513, Henry only managed to capture 2 small French towns a few miles inland from Calais. One of them was called Terouanne. His ministers referred to Terouanne as a graceless doghole, and in truth, it had no strategic importance. But for Henry, it represented part of his dominion as the King of France. He'd enjoyed his first taste of warfare, and he was hungry for more.